Welcome to Bruce Hurwitz Presents Meet the Experts. I'm your host, Bruce Hurwitz of Hurwitz Strategic Staffing. I hope you'll consider us for all your staffing, career counseling, and speech writing needs. I am delighted to be joined today by Ronda Robinson. Our topic is empathy and the bottom line. Meet the Experts is sponsored by P&K CPAs. P&K is a full-service accounting firm. They provide accounting and consulting services to businesses ranging from smart startups to small and mid-cap companies to nonprofits as well as high net worth individuals. Contact them today for a free consultation at pk-cpas.com or call them at 973-882-8810. They will be happy to be of service. Rhonda, welcome to the show.
Bruce, thanks for having me.
Please take a minute or two and introduce yourself to our viewers.
Certainly. So I'm Ronda Robinson. I am a certified professional in talent development, also a master performance consultant, the creator of Practical Empathy, and the founder of the legendary Leaders Club.
That's a mouthful.
I do a little bit.
You do a little bit. All right, our topic is empathy, and you were kind enough to share some slides. Tell us what, and I'll put up the first one. What is empathy?
It's an excellent question, and empathy is getting a lot of press right now as being determined by independent research as the most critical driver of overall results. The idea that empathy is a soft skill, kind of squishy, intangible thing, which is also sometimes confused with sympathy, is really becoming the hallmark of great leaders and something that sets them apart. So what's the difference? Sympathy is when you share like feelings with someone, and usually you'll hear the words, "I'm sorry," or "I understand" in discussions about sympathy. So for example, if someone has lost a loved one, you say, "Oh, I'm so sorry for your loss." Empathy, however, doesn't necessarily mean that you share those same feelings. It's the opportunity to temporarily set aside whatever you're thinking about a situation, go around the backside of the chair and look over the shoulder of a different person and think, how might they be feeling or viewing a specific situation? And so in a conversation, it would sound like, it seems like you're having a hard time after you lost your job. It sounds like you're frustrated because you got overlooked for a promotion at work. You're projecting what that person may be feeling in order to try to understand.
But it sounds like what you're saying is you're being a phony. You're
No.
not really, you're interpreting what the person's saying, but it's not having any impact on you.
So when you're practicing empathy, how you feel doesn't matter. It's all about the other person. And I think that's where a lot of folks get confused as well, is when you're truly showing empathy, you set aside anything to do with how you feel and only focus on the other person. That is a true giving of your entire self to try and understand someone else. Because when you're also processing or you have your own agenda in mind, that's going to be infused in your interaction with that person. The idea of empathy is to be curious, to learn about that other person in an authentic way. And the only way you can authentically be curious is to leave your own agenda and your own thoughts aside.
Okay, so let's go to your next slide. And it's a simple question. How do you become empathetic?
That is the question on the table. There are, if you just look up if you just look up leadership empathy in a Google search, there are 49 million results. And at the end of the day, no matter how much you read and you watch, everyone always asks, how do I do empathy? much of what's out there is what I just described. Like, what does it look like? What's the definition? Why does it matter? And in fact, a lot of research say that empathy is a really strong driver of employee engagement and teamwork and creativity. But no one can tell you, even some of the biggest experts out there, how to do it. They say, well, it's just in my DNA. I'm just an empathetic person. And that's why we need to create this formula of how to do empathy in a purposeful manner, so that you can be strategic, because not everything requires empathy. If someone lost their favorite pen, okay, it was their favorite pen, but as a leader in a business organization, do I really need to have couch time to walk someone through their feelings about losing their favorite pen? Probably not. You want to pay attention to the things that are going to drive results, keep people's minds on the work, and have them be at their best every day.
Now, I told you when we began that since you're in San Francisco and you said it was cool and 70, and I'm in New Jersey and it's close to 100 and humid, that I was finally going to have a guest on who I was going to be difficult with, embarrass, and humiliate. So you knew this was coming.
Bring it on.
All right. In an empathetic and caring way, you keep on saying, do empathy.
Mm-hmm.
That surprises me, because I would think that it would be better to say be empathetic. How do you be empathetic instead of do empathy?
Yes. So be empathetic. I can do that in my own head, right? I can try and think about what someone might be going through in a particular instance. Let's use a tangible example.
Please.
We have an employee named John, and John has worked for his boss, Nadeem, for 10 years, and they have a great working relationship. Well, the organization's going through some changes, and all of a sudden it's announced that Nadeem is being promoted and John's going to get a new boss. All of a sudden you see John withdrawing at work. He's taking longer lunches. He's not getting as much productivity done. Those are the intangible, kind of invisible things that leaders have a hard time grasping. So,
okay, hang on.
Okay.
You said they're invisible. They're not invisible. You can see that John is taking a longer lunch. You can see that his productivity is not what it used to be. And therefore, cause and effect, what happened? Well, all this began when he found out he was getting a new boss.
Right.
So the logical response is, let's get John and his new boss together so that John can realize that his life is not going to be detrimentally impacted, and he's going to have a great new boss.
So that would seem to be the logical, obvious step, and a very valid one at that. Why did I use the word invisible? Is because you don't actually know what's going on inside John's mind. In fact, what's really going on is that he's upset, not only that he's getting a new boss, but he wasn't even asked or given the opportunity to interview to get promoted into Nadeem's position. He's been a valuable employee, and he was completely overlooked. And so his status has been bruised. And so as someone who's empathetic, say it's a coworker, I'm John's coworker, I could see him retreating at work a little bit. Empathetically, I could say, seems like he's taking this change hard. I'm trying to be empathetic, but I'm not doing anything about it. And that's why we use the word do empathy. Because if John doesn't know that you're even thinking about him, considering his feelings, considering the predicament that he finds himself in, then nothing changes. So doing empathy, or the practice of empathy, is where the rubber meets the road and you can actually see tangible results.
So let's move on to your final slide. Because I happen to like the science stuff.
Yes,
So explain what we're looking at here.
you bet. So piggybacking off of John's example, what neuroscience has shown us, and this comes from a group called the Neuroleadership Institute, which is a conglomeration of neuroscientists, behavioral scientists who study the human brain and how that shows up with behavior. It's been recognized since 2008, when this was first published, that there are 5 triggers of emotions that drive human behavior in the social settings such as work. And the brain scans its environment 5 times every second, 5 times every second on these 5 triggers subconsciously. So what happens? When someone feels a threat to one of these triggers, they're in the red. They become disengaged, pessimistic, distracted, problem focused. And how that shows up in their behavior is fight or flight. So some people get really belligerent at work and they get in your face. Other people, like John, right? He just kind of dissolved into the background. It was a flight response. Other people, they freeze. They don't know what to do. Or they become yes men, yes women, because they just don't want any problems. They're just trying to stay as safe and comfortable as they can. By practicing empathy, by actually acknowledging what someone might be feeling, the situation that they're in, and if you can, do something about it, you move them from the red into the blue. And that's a reward state. That's when people are happy. When they're happy and they don't feel threatened, they're engaged, they're collaborative, they're innovative, they're focused on the solutions because they have the comfort and security that they need, which opens up the front part of the brain for logic and creativity. So you can see how practicing empathy or doing empathy translates directly to the bottom line simply by managing these emotional triggers.
Now, one of the things that fascinates me in the institute you mentioned, I was kind of chuckling about because a number of years ago, I was hired to ghostwrite a book for a consultant who generously utilized the work of the institute and sent me a lot of their papers, which I read. He also sent me a lot of books, which I read. And then I tried to explain to him that he couldn't publish and I wouldn't write a book that didn't have proper footnotes.
Yes.
And that's called, I made a joke out of it and told him that one of my professors said that the difference between plagiarism and research is when you steal from one person, it's plagiarism. When you steal from more than one, it's research. Now, it was a joke. Needless to say, it didn't work. Enough on that. But the Institute is excellent. And one of the things that I took away was that by creating habits, by repetition of an action, mental or physical, doesn't matter. If it's physical, it's going to be mental.
Mm-hmm.
You create new pathways in your brain.
Yep.
And you can do new things. So to use your words, to be nice to you now, to do empathy, you create the pathways, this is a question, that will enable you, when it's not John, but Jane, to immediately know how to react. And our topic is the bottom line. Now, it would seem obvious how this would impact the bottom line, meaning raising productivity, lowering expenses. Talk to us about the monetary aspects.
Yes. Yes. So let's just go back to our example of John. And he's putting in, typically an 8-hour day. And even though he's in his seat at work, now that we're all coming back to the office, that is, he's preoccupied with the circumstance. His feelings are hurt. He keeps replaying it over and over again. Why wasn't I chosen? Why didn't anyone ask? Am I not valued? I must not be valued. He has these soundtracks going on in his head. That takes time away from where he could be focusing on work. In addition to that, his new boss, Susan, he might feel a little resentful toward her. And so now teamwork and collaboration takes a hit. And just those two things alone is time and money for the company. It's time and money that's not spent in productivity. And that's just one person with one circumstance. Think about when a company is going through organizational change and people are moving to different departments, they're getting different bosses. Maybe some of your fellow coworkers are even let go. And people are talking about that. They're wondering, they have all this uncertainty about what the future is of not only themselves, but of the company. Uncertainty, by the way, is one of these triggers as well. So if you can provide your team with some certainty, that minimizes the effect of them not spending time in their mind or actually physically doing the work. And so with all of these, and that's just 2 triggers that we've covered so far, status and certainty, where it's impacting the bottom line. And if you, to your point, rewire your brain to just constantly scan your team and your coworkers, even your boss, for things that might be going on with them, number 1 step is just acknowledge it. And you don't have to be correct in what's going on with them. That's why you use these light words like it seems like, it sounds like, it looks like. If you're wrong, they'll tell you, but at least you asked. At least you asked. Do you recognize that something's going on with them? And you genuinely, in a curious manner, want to say that you see it and that you acknowledge it.
So you
Whether or not
you wouldn't go over to somebody and say, Jane, is something bothering you? And Jane responds, no, nothing's bothering me. You would go over and say, it seems to me that you're upset. Is it about this, that, or the other thing?
Right. And you may not even have to know what it is. You can just characterize what your observation is. Jane, you seem really quiet today and distracted. And then just let her tell you yes or no or what it is. If you ask a yes or no question, is something bothering you? People get guarded and they don't just necessarily offer. But if you have described what you are observing, that says to them, oh, you get me. Jane, you seem distracted and awfully quiet today. Yep, I am. I got this thing going on at home and, I really need to leave work early, but I really don't want to ask, or I'm low on PTO hours and I'm trying to decide how to manage all of this. Then you've opened up, something that, if nothing else, just to listen, if not be able to fix or address it.
What you are describing, this is a question, it's peer-to-peer relations?
The practice of empathy can go up, down, and sideways.
Okay.
It's most important from a leader, though, because leaders don't necessarily always recognize the magnitude of effect that they have on their employees.
But anyone can be a leader.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And this is something else I wanted to ask. Going back to John.
Mm-hmm.
Why can't John, or shouldn't John, take the initiative and go to the new boss, whose name Nadine, I think you said, and say, Nadine, welcome. I want to close the door and have a chat with you. I'll be honest with you. I want to work with you, but I'd like a clarification of something. why was I not considered for this position? I'm surprised. What had I not been doing well? Where can I improve so the next time there's a promotion, I'll be in the running? And she would say, I really can't answer that question. I'm new here, I just started, but it's a legitimate question and I'm going to see to it that the right person gives you the answer. And then she does that, and then there's a relationship of trust between the two of them.
It's interesting that you bring up relationship, because relatedness is another one of these triggers. And it stems from, when man was first beginning to live in villages and tribes, it was more secure to be part of a tribe than to be kicked out and be out on your own. Just, it was a survival mechanism. And so our brain, still with some of that primitive residue, the default is always that if you have someone that you've just met, especially if they're not like you, you have no connectivity, you don't have anything in common that you know of, the default is foe. And some people are really good at, building friends quickly, but your primitive brain, the default is still foe.
Is still foe?
Foe, yeah, you are a foe to me.
Oh, I'm thinking FAUX. You're saying FOE. Okay.
FOE, yes.
Okay.
Fee, fi, fo, fum, right? And so it's reasonable to think that John, he's bruised because he wasn't even considered for a promotion that he's aware of. And now Susan comes in as the new boss. He's never met her before, doesn't know anything about her. You took an opportunity for me, Susan. You're a foe. I don't like you. Now, his logical brain is probably saying that's not appropriate thinking in the workplace, and I need to break bread and make friends. But until he gets to that place, he's still retreated. Remember, he's in the red. He's in threat mode. When you're in threat mode, your logical brain isn't working. It's all back here in the primitive brain.
But she should also, somebody should have known that John would be feeling this way.
Not necessarily. Susan came from a completely different part of the organization. She doesn't know John. She never heard of John.
Somebody who does know John should have realized that this would have been a problem. That this would have been, you said that, I forget the word that you used, I would say that his ego had been bruised. And part of empathy should be the ability to predict the reaction of people to change, because you're going to be empathetic towards change. If there's no change, there's no need for empathy.
So yes, with, you don't always know what's going on in the entirety of a single human being. And, with John and Nadine, they had a great working relationship for 10 years. John hadn't imagined Nadine was ever going to go anywhere. So he'd never said, hey, Nadine, if you ever take off, can I have your job? They're friends and they work together, and he just thought that was always going to be a constant. So it was a surprise that all of a sudden Nadim is going elsewhere, and it was a surprise that he hadn't had that opportunity. Now, this goes into a whole nother talk show about continuous feedback and talking about people about their goals and whatnot. So in a healthy environment, those conversations would have taken place, but in this case, it didn't. And in a lot of organizations, especially in high growth modes, people just start to get to know each other, and then these changes.
And Rhonda, I'm afraid you just froze. I hope it's temporary and that it's only on my end. But to be on the safe side, I am going.
No, change is coming. Here's what it looks like. Here's what we know, and keep them informed.
Okay, Rhonda, we had a problem. Last minute, probably 30 seconds, you froze.
Ah,
So it's happened once before, and it's kind of silly, but is there anything that you've said in the last 45 seconds that you want to repeat?
so what I was saying is that certainty is, as we know, a big trigger as well of human behavior. So the best thing you can do is tell people change is coming, let them know what that's going to look like, tell them what you do know, and tell them there's a plan to keep them informed. So as long as people know that they're not going to be surprised, it really helps to settle down the voices in your head and start guessing what could happen, because people always think the worst rather than the best.
And I have one final question for you. And as I am asking it, I'm going to share your contact information. Is there anything that I did not ask you that you wish I had asked you?
The one thing that I wish that you would ask is, when will leaders start thinking about empathy and people first rather than the tasks and the to-do list at work? Because it's the people who drive the business.
You asked it, you answered. You have an answer?
Because it's the people that drive the business. So while the legendary leaders...
You said the question was, when will leaders?
Yes, when will leaders start thinking about people first, thinking about empathy first? Because when you have a fully engaged team, then the work will follow. And in fact, we talked about how empathy distinguishes legendary leaders from average ones. Why? Because legendary leaders get the most from their people by practicing empathy, and their people will go through walls for them.
Well, we've gone through a good half hour of insightful conversation, and on behalf of all of the viewers, I thank you profusely for having come on.
Bruce, thanks for having me.
It's been a pleasure. I'm Bruce Hurwitz. Thank you for watching, and as always, please stay focused on success.